There's an obvious reason for choosing a scene like this, the gladiator scene, because it's big, you know, and incredibly eye-catching. But there are 2 or 3 scenes, I think, that you could pick out of the whole run of 12 shows, which you could say are iconic in the sense they symbolise and pull together all the things that Rome is about, HBO's Rome is about. And I would definitely say that the gladiator scene is one of them. And I would say it's because it's spectacular, it's eye-catching, you cannot stop watching it, because it's extremely, it's violent, but it's extremely visceral. And yet at the same time, it's also surprising. It's cliche busting in that it's gladiators, but it's not gladiators as you've seen them before. If you press it and you investigate it and you examine it, you can find that it's actually historically accurate. Thank heavens for that. In the sense that it's really about the kind of show that you would have seen had you been in Rome at the time. And then last of all, although it's big and spectacular on a big canvas, it's got a very intense personal core to it. It's got a thing going on in it in the middle, which is that thing that happens to Pullo when he's kind of saved from committing suicide. Well, in fact, he is saved from committing suicide by the one last thing that means something to him. And also, it personally zeroes in on perhaps the essential human relationship at the heart of the whole show, which is him and Vorenus. Vorenus, who's gone through an hour and a half, if you're a viewer of watching him, saying, he's dead to me. And suddenly the one thing that can propel them back together, and it's going to be the driving force in the whole show as long as the show lasts, is that relationship. The thing that reforms that relationship is the drama that takes place in the arena. So it seems to me it sort of ticks all the boxes, all the things that the show's trying to do and that makes the show different from other versions or takes on ancient Rome that we've seen before.
We're trying to do a gladiator fight that doesn't look like any other gladiator fight.
It's grisly and shocking. It pushes all the buttons we're looking to try and push in the show.
What we have going on is a culmination of weeks of work and months of scripts being written, so we've sort of pulled out all the stops.
This is a very challenging scene because you're combining extras with dramatic dialogue scene with fighting.
It's a big scene, but I think the hardest thing about it is really capturing the emotion of the action.
It's a bunch of departments working together to get this whole sequence done.
The challenge is always time and moving ahead. You can't really second guess, you just have to keep moving.
Let's cut! Okay, let's reset right away.
The standard idea of a gladiator fighting was that in the Colosseum, it's a huge spectacle. What actually happened, certainly in this period, was that it was used as a punishment for criminals, so it was a much more prosaic day-to-day routine.
We wanted to try and create something that was completely authentic to the time, to the late Republic. That's the crucial thing. This is just the beginning. It didn't get to be the greatest show on earth for a good another 100 years.
Ours is much more gritty, and it wasn't quite as well orchestrated in those days as it became later on.
Once we decided that we wanted to go with a more primitive version, it was then a question of bringing all the departments in line with that. So exactly what kind of weapons there would be, what the choreography would be, what the gladiators would be wearing, the fact that refreshments were sold, what the food was going to look like.
It takes a tremendous amount of coordination with costumes, stunts, the art department, special effects, just to create the atmosphere that's needed.
I kind of figure out what should be what, and then you get the input from all the heads of departments, and we all agree on how we think we should proceed with that. Pretty much after the fact, I do storyboards, so everybody has that as a guide, but it's only a guide. Once I start shooting, a lot of things happen where you get a lot of things for free, so to speak, and I like to take advantage of that.
Michael started also as DP, and so it's nice to work with someone that did your job, can understand your problem.
You gotta use 2 cameras. Unless it's a stunt with a car crash, you tend to not use more than 2 cameras because the 3rd, 4th, 5th camera, they get compromised in where they are, and then you start composing your shot not to see the other camera.
Can we see our gentleman lie down, please, Kieran?
Smeet down, he's amazing. Mikhail Solomon is just, I've never known anybody throw a camera around like him. It's fantastic. He's brilliant director.
We will do from so many angles. We will use for sure crane, low angle, wide angle, ramping, change over crank.
The this was their justice, was that if someone is accused of murder and found guilty, this is the fate, and they would have to go in the arena, and that became part of the entertainment.
The great myth about gladiator contests is that they always ended in a death. Only 6 or 7% of gladiator contests ended in a death. The medical support available for gladiators was superior to that available for the Roman army on the move. And that was, by contemporary standards, unbelievably sophisticated. You could patch people up because gladiators were so expensive to train and they were such valuable commodities that simply to allow them to die wholesale in fights was just not on for the people who ran them. And like anything else, this was ultimately a business. This whole thing is very Barnum, a slightly kitschy kind of entertainment.
It's a little bit of a carnival, a little bit like a football match, kind of a boxing match, more of a populist activity.
Caesar, who was the consummate showman, was the guy who really promoted gladiators as a mass entertainment. And all of this is part of that same sort of WWF.
It's a bloodthirsty, kick-ass sort of gladiator battle.
This is the most important way Caesar has of shoring up his support in Rome at a time when things were all still a bit rocky. It's bread and circuses.
Pure scope of the sets was amazing. When you go in there and shoot, it's like shooting in any other city, basically, except it's 2,000 years ago.
We're trying to get a real sense of the reality of how it would have been, and this is exactly it.
We thought it'd be much more interesting to have the fight in the Forum, using the Forum as a background and presenting it here, and also in a square format, which is apparently correct as well.
On the floor down there, the sand, which is where we get the word arena from, because the Latin word for sand is harina. They cover the floor in sand. The gruesome reason for that is simply because once the blood starts to flow, it gives you still a bit of grip. You get a bit of traction because the sand soaks the blood up.
There were certain gladiators who became really popular, and they would have the numbers of their fights and the ones they've won. So that's what we're doing here. We're making up these big posters.
But there's several different ways you could become a gladiator. The most likely way is if you're caught in war and you're a reasonably strong male, you're going to get screened and then they may put you in what's called a gladiator school. If you're a slave, and again, if you're big and strong, you may get turned into a gladiator. Those are the two most obvious routes. Surprisingly enough, some people chose to be gladiators because it was so intensely, unimaginably glamorous.
There'd be billboards and banners with their names promoting them like they promote rock stars now.
They are the genuine names of real gladiators.
One of the sets of gladiators about which we know most fought in Pompeii. And of course, with Pompeii, everything survives in a way it doesn't anywhere else. And so we found out that gladiators had stage names, like Hilaris, the Joker.
One thing I think that's important with a piece like this is that the background is the background. We're not doing huge establishing shots because the whole thing is about moving the story forward all the time. And then we catch Rome here and there and everywhere in glimpses. That's, I think, it's a much better way to show these fantastic sets off. It's like when you're shooting Toronto for New York, you go out of your way to make it New York, but if you're shooting New York for New York, you don't even think about it because you know it's New York.
Tomorrow I enter the gladiators' arena to be put to death. And as part of the ritual beforehand, I shall be shaved and shorn to add to the spectacle. So here, I'm losing my hard-won hair.
After a ton of research and watching every other gladiator movie since 1928, we were determined to do something a little bit different. And in fact, we hope a lot different. I want it to look real and funky and kind of carnival-like. We think that all of these gladiators, first of all, are probably all prisoners from different parts of the world. They're supposed to look big and mean.
This big man, we prepare with all stuff, we cut it there inside, so it's very horrible.
This is a great Gorgon. This is gladiator number 2. I think he gets his arm cut off. Augusto makes all of these, starting from scratch. And he made this, and this guy gets his head cut off.
I like to shoot it in continuity because it's very hard to keep track of the continuity of the wounds because, you know, he gets a cut, then the makeup puts it on, but then if you, like you normally shoot things out of continuity, you have to go back and check how was it, was it there at the time.
When you throw it down again, at that point, the whole audience goes, ooh!
We need audience reactions from the extras, which is always harder than you think. I was actually toying with the idea of shooting most of the extra reactions first, while they're still fresh, and have the stunt guys kind of do the action for them. I think we're going to have about 350 extras, but we're actually going to make them look more than that. You can stack them up in a way so that it looks like more than that.
He's lost his friend, he's lost his home, he's lost the love of his life, he's lost his legion. The man's got nothing left. He doesn't want to play, he doesn't want to fight, just wants to sit on the ground and have it over with.
It's effectively judicial murder because the idea is that Pullo's just going in there to have his head chopped off. The crowd are not expecting him to live for more than 30 seconds.
They want a spectacle for the crowd, and he doesn't want to give them a spectacle. He just really just wants it to end.
Stand up and fight.
I don't want to. I just want to die, all right? But the one thing they do, they make a mistake. They insult the one thing that's precious to him, which was his legion.
You and the whole 13th, not but bloody mollies. Why don't you and the 13th all line up and suck my cock?
Here we have a retractable spike, which Pullo will stick into one of the gladiators that's attacking them, which is a telescopic one. Attach this to his stomach, underneath his costume, and as he's going over the air, you'll see the other end of the spear sticking out of his back.
It's very hard in the script to visualize what the stunts are, what the choreography is, and that's actually what I spend a lot of time with Frank doing, trying to work out a choreography.
To do a fight scene realistically requires a great deal of rehearsal and work because you can't just let them get their swords out and have a go at it.
We're also in a gym near the set. And the gym is organized for all the training of the actor.
Giorgio was telling me that when it hits, as you go poof. But I quite like what you said, which is,
It's not just about how clever the stunts are or how heroic you might look. They're born the characters in mind, so the fighting is different.
We are really lucky because Kevin and Ray are both strong. They want to do the best. They are really in good condition.
Usually you shoot the whole thing with stunt doubles that look like them and it's dressed like them, but in this case we'll actually be able to do most of it with the real actors. So we'll actually be able to, in the same shot, to go from a wide shot to a close shot, which is obviously a great advantage.
I am never satisfied, you know. Of course, in the gym we did some rehearsal perfect. Now we must adjust 100 things. We try to be ready when we shoot.
It's like they've worked out this wonderful dance, and all you have to do is hit the beats and do that and just be in there. They've made this happen for me.
These swords was for the fight, so this is the real one for all the close-up work that you do, so it looks great for the camera. And then when we come to doing the stunts, we have these, which are rubber and a lot softer and safer.
Today I got my arm chopped off, as we all know, unfortunately for me.
These days, you can actually do it so realistic because you can combine visual effects, which is computer effects, with special effects, which is the floor effects, the mechanical effects.
What we've done a few times on this is to actually just go out in the back lot and shoot some tests. It's just so everyone's got a clearer idea of the kind of elements we'll need and how we'll put the shot together. We've got these crosses on here that we can use to give us a clean line so we know where the arm's going to be severed.
There's no actual sword, there's no blade. So it just goes through the air and then they put it in later on. It's very, very clever.
This is the final, what we came up with for the gladiator's arm being cut off. This is for the arm falling to the ground after it's been cut off. We also put in the wound, bit of the arm that you can now see severed, and some blood effects.
Because it's very costly to do CG, so you have a prosthetic arm that replicates the one that we just had in CG to lie on the ground for the rest of the sequence.
She put there inside, it looks real.
We're also chopping a head of a guy, same thing. You You have a CG head you chop off, and then you have a practical prosthetic head that you leave in there.
Having my head cut off, a little bit of a worry, you know.
So it cuts out.
Yeah, exactly. But also more.
We were talking to props about how we might shoot that, and came up with the idea of having a special shield made.
Tomorrow, when we do the real rehearsal, I'll measure the guy, measure how deep his neck is, and then cut that out of there. It'll go straight over his neck without cutting his head off for real.
Then we'll fill in the hole in the shield in post-production.
I came here to Rome and I lost my head.
Special effects guys, they supply blood pumps to get the blood to spray out after the CG effect is over.
We have like 100 liters of blood that we have ready to throw on, and we have all kinds of blood squirts and blood elements that we're going to add onto the blades and onto the weapons. We're going to fill up the whole floor of this with the blood and everything, make it look really a healthy place to work in.
The general approach to the series was not to get overawed by the spectacle and the visuals, because it's very easy to make it beautiful and shocking and big. It's really about these two soldiers, not about the blood and the gore. That's what it was like, so you have to show that, but it's really about those two individuals caught up in events much larger than themselves.
The injustice of it all is witnessed by Vorenus.
Caesar has directly given him an order saying you cannot help Pullo because people who are associated with me cannot be seen to help our veterans because they're causing trouble and are putting pressure on him politically.
In order to be exciting, it needs to move and move fast. And we have certain cutaways where we're cutting to one of the characters that's outside the arena. That helps. It always gives you a sense that it's actually been longer than what it really has been.
It made both dramatic and technical sense to intercut the two. Essentially, Pullo's there because of Caesar's subterfuge, and Posca is about to reveal that fact to us.
I think more than the action, the whole importance of the sequence is the bond of friendship. We're getting romantic about this, but...
Pullo wins the crowd around by the end. He's so zoned in about the one thing that means anything to him in his whole life. He's not even aware that he's winning them round.
My character, well, we parted company, but we're dealing with all this shit and stuff, but in the end, it's a kind of boy's own moment.
I was about as near death as you could possibly get. I was like, seconds away from the killer blow.
The one thing that trumps every other loyalty and every other ideal in the minds of a very pious man like Vorenus is the bond that he made with his fellow soldiers in the 13th. So when Pullo cries out the family name, essentially, Vorenus can't resist. It's like someone crying for their mother.
The glue of that is unbreakable.
In the heat of the moment, just seeing the injustice, Vorenus decides to go in and kick some ass, and kind of save his pal. So I'm kind of flouting Caesar in the same moment as saving my friend.
The great thing about the sequence here is the story where Vorenus stands up for Pullo.
Here's a very, very end sequence of where our bad guys get nailed by his own weapon, and here he gets impaled by his own club. The human skull. So the idea is we see the two faces next to it, one dying and one his own skull, which is obviously a metaphor for death.
Originally, we were just thinking about a simple pole with the skull having a hole through it.
This is actually before he rolled 2 times. Just
yeah.
In this case, we realised that This was kind of a bit limiting because you're not just trying to fill in the clean background, you're trying to put pieces of Varanus back into the shot. So that was where we came up with the idea of the telescopic pole.
We start off with this, and then we go to this. Visual effects will add from my hand down onto here, and it will slowly disappear.
It would just be a matter of putting the weapon in over the top of the pole. Like I said, very crude, but it's certainly helpful in showing everyone what we're thinking about.
If you don't see it, that means it works. If you see the effect, that means something's wrong. So making everything look very natural.
Stop.
The part where the characters, Apollo and Varanus, are joined back together is one of the most incredible moments for their journey.
They've had years of battle, history together, and that's what kind of comes through together.
When you've been through something like that, you look after each other. You don't look after yourself. It's about the man standing next to you. And I think that's what happens.
The two of them are reconciled to the fact that they do have a relationship, and they'll become sort of folk heroes.
This is the best stuff, man. Much better than doing dialogue.
Living the dream. You're not in a gym with a squared off mat working it out. You're actually in there, and obviously you've got the crowd as well. Once you get them sort of cheering, it's just like
Yeah, they're really into it, man.
Aren't they?
Yeah, they're like method extras.
And they're enjoying it. A bit of bloodlust.
Looks like you had a rough weekend.
You should see the other guys. What's left of them.